were excited to see the gifts. They began to try the gifts, and Odysseus noticed that one had her eyes fixed on the sword. Suddenly one of Odysseus' men ran into the palace shouting that they were being attacked by pirates. The girls screamed hysterically, running to their rooms, but Achilles instinctively grabbed his sword and assumed a fighting stance. There were no pirates, it was all a ploy organized by Odysseus, and in this way the cross-dressing hero was unmasked. Achilles, feeling ashamed that he had been exposed, was pleased to be summoned to head for Troy along with the other Greek heroes. He had remained hidden only by the action of his divine mother. Achilles bid farewell to the Princess Demia and his son Pius. This little boy was destined to achieve glories almost as great as those of his father. Achilles promised Odysseus that he would gather his men and join Agamemnon's army to achieve glory in front of the walls of Troy. While Agamemnon was managing the last preparations before leaving with his gigantic army towards Troy, he decided to send an embassy to the court of King Priam of Troy on a diplomatic mission. The Greek delegation included the astute Otis of Ithaca, Palamedes of the island of Euboea, and Menus, king of Sparta. The arrival of the Hellenic entourage surprised the entire Trojan court. Until that moment, news of Helen's abduction had not yet reached Troy. The Greek heroes demanded an audience with King Priam to deal with their prince's terrible offenses. Priam received the emissaries in his palace, believing that the litigants would ask for the rescue of Princess Heston. After all, that was the purpose of the mission imposed on Paris. Although Odysseus Palamedes was the leader of the entourage, Palamedes was known to have the gift of speech and to have a silver tongue. He was so good with words that he was the inventor of several letters of the Greek alphabet. The leader of the entourage presented his case to the king of Troy, exposing the crime against hospitality committed by Paris, who kidnapped his host's wife and stole his treasures. Palamedes demanded that the king of Troy peacefully return the queen of Sparta to her husband, and he threatened to take the war into Trojan territory if King Agamemnon's demands were not met. At that moment, Priam's sons took up their swords, feeling offended at the Greek threat, but Priam ordered the princes to put away their swords, as the Greek nobles were only messengers of King Agamemnon. King Priam claimed to be unaware of his son's actions and said that the Greek queen was not hiding in his court. The king also said that the Greeks had no morals to support such demands. After all, in the recent past, Hercules had kidnapped the Princess Hesione of Troy, taking her to Greece. Priam said he would return Helen to the Greeks if they would return his sister, whom he had not seen for a long time. Palamedes emphasized that the great King Agamemnon's terms were non-negotiable. Hesione lives happily in Salamis, where she reigned alongside her husband, having sent her beloved son Patroclus to join the huge Hellenic army to turn the walls of Troy into dust. Trying to keep calm, Priam said that given the case, Queen Helen of Sparta would be returned to her homeland if she appeared at court, and that was her wish. Otherwise she would have asylum and protection in Troy. Odysseus realized that Palamedes was only increasing the animosity between the two peoples. The king of Ithaca tried to lessen the tension of Palamedes and Priam's speeches. He, upon entering Troy, had realized that the city was a real fortress, and the walls built by Apollo and Poseidon were practically impenetrable. A siege of that city would make the war last for years. Therefore, Odysseus tried to get Palamedes and Priam to come to a reasonable agreement, but the Trojan king had his pride wounded by Palamedes' his threats, who sowed seeds of Eris in Priam's heart. The diplomatic mission failed. War was around the corner, and the hatred Odysseus felt for Palamedes grew. His rival squandered the opportunity to keep peace between the two peoples. In Greece, several kings presented themselves at Alis, where the great army was forming. These kings gathered there to fulfill the oath sealed among the nobles who swore to defend the marriage of Minos and Helen of Sparta, and to fulfill that oath the nobles sent their ships and best warriors to form the greatest army the Greek world had ever seen. The Hellenes wished that Nemesis and the Aerones would be on the Greek side in their quest for revenge and retribution, fed by the injury to Paris, the Trojan prince who had violated the enforced laws of Zeus by kidnapping the beautiful Queen Helen. All the resources and supplies needed to further the endeavor against the Trojans were gathered, and diplomatic efforts to avoid a full-scale conflict had failed. War was about to break out. The order was given for all commanders and men to prepare to depart. As soon as the wind conditions were favorable, the mighty army would leave for Asia. All the armies were mobilized. But a great calm was felt on the beaches of Bias. The wind necessary for the departure stopped blowing. Not even a simple breeze seemed to help the efforts of the On several windless days past, the soldiers who had long been waiting began to grow impatient. The temporary camps had not been planned for such a long stay. Supply problems and disease proliferation began to lower the morale of the combatants. Some soldiers died ingloriously without having set foot on Tr land. Discontent was general. It seemed that the gods were not willing to favor the Greeks in their goals. All kinds of rumors began to circulate through the camp. To prevent this situation from getting completely out of control, the nobles decided to turn to a well-known seer. His name was Callas. The priest was appointed as the official seer of the Greek army. At that time, no army had the courage to go off to war without a seer capable of interpreting the hopes of the gods by observing the flight of birds and examining the entrails of animals sacrificed to the gods. These priests were able to communicate with the gods, and through the prophetic powers granted by Apollo, these men were able to reveal the wishes of the gods. The men gathered around and watched Callas apprehensively as he looked to the sky for a message from the gods. The seer's serene expression quickly changed to a sorrowful countenance. The seer addressed the crowd and revealed the will of the gods. He stated that such tranquility was not just a meteorological phenomenon. The absence of wind was a reprisal of the goddess armies against Agamemnon. The king's son of Atreus had killed one of the deer consecrated to the goddess Artemis during a hunt, and as if that were not enough, Agamemnon had the courage to say that not even the goddess of hunting could kill that creature with such a sharp blow. Offended, the goddess demanded that the winds sto blowing on the shores of Aulis until the great king was reconciled with the goddess. To do that, he would have to sacrifice what he loved most, his beautiful young daughter Eugenia. Great sorrow struck all who heard those omens, but no one would suffer more than Agamemnon. Music. The great camp of the Greek army was exceedingly silent. The terrible omen uttered by the seer Callas affected all the ons. After all, to demand of a man the sacrifice of his beloved daughter seemed music, inconceivable in his tent. The great sovereign Agamemnon was dismayed at his terrible fate imposed by the ladies of destiny. His greatest desire had always been to have all the Greek nobles under his command, seeking a common goal, but he was not prepared to pay the horrendous price needed to fulfill his ambitions. The king of Mai talked to his brother Menus and said that he would not sacrifice his beloved daughter just to rescue his brother's wife who had been kidnapped by the Trojans, and he stated that his wife Clymnestra would never allow one of her daughters to be sacrificed. Menus, who initially understood his brother's pain, was more incisive, showing the truth that his brother's pain did not allow him to decipher. He said that the thousands of men who were there were someone's sons, and that father sent his most precious treasure to fight and sacrifice. For the honor of the people, these patriarchs put into his hands the most formidable generation of young men that Greece had ever produced, to shed their sweat and blood for the glory and pride of their land. The most powerful man in Greece wept like a child while his brother tried to console him. He knew that there was no other way but to carry out the will of the gods. Agamemnon knew that his wife would not agree with that decision, so he decided to deceive her. In his letter to the queen, Agamemnon called for the presence of the princess Eugenia in the military camp to celebrate her marriage to the renowned hero Achilles. Menus and the other Greeks were pleased with Agamemnon's brave decision, but Odysseus, suspicious in the evening, another messenger hastily departed from the tent of the paramount chief, unaware that Menus and Dsus were watching him. They intercepted the messenger carrying a message for the queen of Myes, ordering her not to bring her daughter to the shores of Aulis. A short time later, Iphigenia and Queen Clymnestra arrived at the camp of the Ons. They realized that the reception was very different from what they had imagined, as it resembled a funeral. Agamemnon pressed his daughter against his chest, and many tears fell from his eyes. The princess was surprised, as she had never seen her father cry. The queen told her not to worry, as he was thrilled to give his beloved daughter to another man. Suddenly, in a fluke, Achilles passed nearby, and seeing him, the queen congratulated the man on his betrothal, but Achilles did not seem to understand what was happening as he had not established any marriage. Achilles quickly realized Agamemnon's plot. The latter had used Achilles' name to lure his daughter into sacrifice. Feeling outraged, he revealed the whole truth to the queen. Clytemnestra knelt at Achilles' feet and, taking his hand, begged him to defend her daughter against such a treacherous act. Achilles assured the queen that he would defend Iphigenia and her honor even if it cost him his life. The queen ran to Agamemnon's tent where the priests who would organize the sacrifice were already gathered. Clytemnestra embraced her daughter to protect her and told her everything her father had prepared. The young princess could not believe that her father would be capable of such a thing. Iphigenia begged her father not to let them sacrifice her as she was innocent and had nothing to do with that dispute, but consumed with sorrow, Agamemnon said that it was the will of the gods, and before them even the mightiest of kings was powerless. Achilles suddenly entered the tent, sword drawn, and said that no one would touch the princess while he was alive. He also said that if they killed him, the whole expedition would be ruined, as it was prophesied that the Greeks would only achieve victory if he fought. On the walls of Troy, the young princess seemed to be moved by the wisdom of the gods, and Achilles put down his sword. She said she would agree to be sacrificed, for on this depended the lives of all the Greek warriors and of the sons of Greece who would shed their blood on Trojan soil. She would give her blood on behalf of all the women of Greece. Ailes took Iphigenia's hands and told her that she was the most virtuous woman he had ever known. He added that he would have had the highest of honors if he had been her husband, if that had been the will of the gods. If Gia asked her mother to forgive her father, as he had no other choice but to obey the will of the gods. The whole army was moved to see the princess haughtily climbed the stairs that led to the altar of sacrifice. Agamemnon placed the dagger around the neck of his daughter, who calmly offered it. She asked the goddess Artemis to accept the supreme sacrifice on behalf of all Greece. The king, letting out a great cry of pain, slashed the neck of his beloved daughter. Shortly afterward, Agamemnon laid the inert body of Iphigenia on the altar. A strong wind began to blow towards Troy, and the thousands of warriors on the beaches of Aulis celebrated the heroic sacrifice of Princess Eugenia. Agamemnon, still covered in his daughter's blood, swore that Troy would be ruined and that he would use its ashes to build a monument to Eugenia's sacrifice. After the sacrifice of Igia, the Greek armada was finally ready to head for Troy. Their ships were stocked, and the men were eager to begin their journey. Calus had made the last sacrifices to the gods to ensure a safe journey. Suddenly the seer observed on the branch of the tree above his head a snake approaching a nest with 8 sparrowlings, and their mother the serpent devoured all the birds. And Calus revealed to the Greeks the meaning of that omen. He said that the sons of Priam would fall one by one. Eventually the city of Troy would succumb before the courage of the sons of Hellas. At that moment all the warriors celebrated, but they did not hear the rest of the prediction. It would take 9 long years of siege for the city to fall in the 10th with the help of favorable winds. The giant Greek armada crossed the Iron Sea towards Troy. More than 1,200 ships filled with warriors set sail from the beaches of Uhlus. Punished Troy after the humiliation caused by the enemies who had kidnapped Queen Helen of Sparta. Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek army, wanted revenge, but he was also motivated by greed. He wanted the spoils of war to make him richer and more powerful. Other heroes like Achilles aimed to achieve glory on the battlefields and placed their name marked among the stars. Odysseus and his family, several other warriors, wanted to triumph on the Trojan battlefield. Among them was the gigantic Ajax of Salamis and Diomedes of Argos. Another famous warrior of that time destined to make his mark in the conflict was Philes. He was a faithful friend of Hercules and received from the great hero his magnificent bow and arrows, poisoned with the Hydra's blood while Hercules was in agony. Although he was destined for great achievements, a huge misfortune struck the hero as he was leaving the ship to stock it up with supplies for the journey. In the middle of the grass a snake suddenly emerged, which attacked Phil's leg. Some say that the snake was carrying out orders from Hera, who was punishing him for befriending Hercules, an enemy of the goddess. The hero was helped back to the boat by his friends. Feeling terrible pain, his wound caused a black spot to spread down his leg. The pain was so great that poor Philo couldn't stop screaming in pain the putrid odor of the hero's wound in addition to Philo's endless screams and groans disturbed the sailors and warriors of the neighboring ships. Odysseus crumbling, which could be a tragedy for the expedition Odysseus ties ship to dock on the island of Lemnos where the hero would disembark. Files was left on the beach by Odysseus' men along with his bow and quiver and some supplies. The experienced hero and his special bow would have been an important help in the great battles that followed. The Greeks even came to regret having abandoned him far away. Prince Paris was finally returning to Troy with the beautiful Helen by his side, although they were struck by the beauty of the Spartan queen. The people regarded her harshly, for they knew she carried with her the pains of the god Ares and his sinister retinue. The Trojan nobles and princes did not want Paris and his prey to settle in the royal palace, but when they saw the treasures stolen from Sparta which were to be distributed between them and the beautiful Greek women accompanying Helen who could be their concubines, the nobles quickly changed their minds, welcoming the prince. Queen Hecuba at the king's request asked Helen if she was reporting to court of her own free will. Helen assured her that she was there out of genuine love for Prince Paris, and that her life was in danger because of the enormous hatred the Greeks had for her. After that answer, King Priam ensured that she remained under his protection, granting her Trojan citizenship from that day, and she became known as Helen of Troy. The huge Greek squadron was heading for the Trojan shores. Thousands of Greek warriors wished to achieve glory in front of the mighty city gates. On the beach, Hector, the Trojan prince, commanded the royal army on behalf of his father King Priam. They aimed to push the Greeks back into the sea, but they were not prepared to face an army of that size. The ships of the Ons had already reached the beach, although it was a great honor to be the first to invade Trojan lands. The Greeks hesitated, for a prophecy said that the first man to set foot on Trojan lands during the war would also be the first to leave for the kingdom of Hades. Odysseus that something had to be done quickly, so he threw his shield onto the sand and jumped on it without touching the Trojan sands. The king of Ithaca asked his compatriots to disembark and conquer the beaches before Hector's army was reinforced. Odysseus, fired by the Trojans and his courage, persuaded the men to disembark. Patroclus, son of the old king Achilles, was the first Greek to set foot on the beaches of Troy. Proestos filled himself with courage and led his men to conquer the beach. He advanced and defeated several Trojan warriors who stood in his way, but his enormous bravery brought him face to face with the mighty Hector, the champion of Troy. The two heroes measured their strength, but Patroclus would fulfill the prophecy. Hector took his life, and Patroclus was the first Greek to fall on Trojan soil. Achilles and his army of Myrmidons attacked the left flank of the enemy army. The superiority of the warriors of the son of Thetis made the men of Troy tremble, but Achilles soon met his first great challenge. The warrior's name was Pinus, a mighty demigod, son of Poseidon. It was said that he could not be killed with a spear or sword, arrow or stone. He was practically invulnerable. Achilles felt pleased to duel with a foe who could match his abilities. The son of Peleus hurled his spear with all his might against Ps's chest, but the spear bounced off the demigod's bronze breastplate, which was given to him by Hephaestus, the lord of the forges. The son of the lord of the seas also threw his spear, which was blocked by Achilles. The force of the throw was so great that it went right through the shield. Achilles took his sword and advanced against the Trojan ally, but the